One of the great things about the edge effect is it's a metaphor, right, for where we're at, which leaves space for your interpretation, for your lived experience and the work that you're interested in. It leaves space for you. So for me, as I interpret the edge effect, I feel like I was changing some of my thinking in the work that I do with connecting early education with elementary schooling. And right now, and when he was talking about harmony, thinking of the edge effect in terms of harmony or disharmony, I was thinking, oh, right, we always treat it like there's a battle of ideas, but where are the places of convergence? Where are the places where we can grow new things at the edges? So I was taking away some new things. So one of the intentions of the Elevating Impact Summit is that you get to see how business approaches are driving social impact in multiple industries, multiple disciplines. For me, early childhood education, right? And Silicon Valley and the software industry, they're famous for how they handle or talk about entrepreneurship. But entrepreneurship is driving creative solutions in many places. And our next speaker embodies how these ideas are formulating in her work. So she not only borrows tools from business to change statewide policy and nationwide prejudice, but she is inventing new practices as she goes. So Reyna Lopez, she's a daughter of Mexican immigrants. She's the executive director for PICUN, Oregon Farm Workers Union. Can we get a hand for PICUN? Over a decade, Reyna's been a fierce leader and advocate for the Latinx community in Oregon. She received the Immigrant Award and from the American Association of Immigration Lawyers of Oregon, and she's Willamette University's Young Alumni of the Year. And so her work in social justice causes, campaigns, movement, coalition building. She's also leading national efforts as a member of the board for the Center for Popular Democracy. And she's the secretary-treasurer of the Oregon Working Families Party. Wow, when did she sleep? So among her many entrepreneurial qualities, Reyna is an expert at partnerships. And some advocacy organizations are competing for funding and press. Reyna has built a new model for collaboration among allied organizations, an idea that we desperately need. So please welcome Reyna to the Elevating Impact Summit.
Hey y'all, how's it going? Nice to see everyone here today. Se puede! Si se puede! That's what we do. It's like a culture thing in our organization. Whenever we kind of start it off, we kind of chant together, and the chant is si se puede. So when I say se puede, you say si se puede. Se puede? Si se puede. Awesome. So now we're ready to go. So I just use this little clicker, right? And there it is. No, wait, that's not it. There we go. Hi everyone. So as you heard, I'm Reyna Lopez. I'm the executive director of PICUN. We represent farm workers and Latinx working families here in Oregon, and we have since 1985. And a little bit before that, there's a whole other story that can go behind that. So I understand I only have 20 minutes, so I'll try not to go over. I will admit, when I got the call to speak about the edge effect, I really had to digest what that means. I've never had to put my work into these terms before, so I really had to settle into it before making this presentation. And I'm actually really excited to get to talk to you about Alianza Poder. It's a network of sister organizations that PICUN is the anchor organization of, and I'm very excited to get to explore this idea of how creativity happens in the margins of society with you, and how it happens at PICUN specifically. So thinking a little bit deeper about how my organization does it, and about the resilience and the resistance that has really happened in Black and Indigenous communities of color here in the United States, but really all over the world, I started to have a lot of fun with the topic, and I'm excited to get to share it with you today. Because honestly, like I said, wow, before I was like, I didn't really understand how this fancy term fit in, but now I'm really having fun with it. So first, I'll start off with saying that to me, this was never the edge effect. This to me was survival. This to me was sacrifice, the sacrifice of my family coming here and trying to find a better life for us. To me, this was about getting really creative with all the little resources that we had, right? And really making magic with our stories, with our cultural connections, with something bigger than ourselves, and really what our dreams could be, and creating a process of our own to manifesting those dreams into a reality. I believe deeply that our experiences, that our stories are very connected to this idea of the edge effect. Some of you might ask, what does your story have to do with this, right? And I had to think about this too, but it has everything to do with it. And while I'm being really gifted the opportunity to basically stand on the shoulders of giants is the way that I heard it put before, but to lead an organization that is also leading a collective of organizations into thinking about how we solve some of the deepest issues in our society. I also think about what the organizations were built off of, which it really was a lot of pain. It was trauma, still is some trauma, and also how my own culture has allowed me to bring these solutions into our communities in a way that keeps us deeply connected to each other, deeply in relationship with each other, and to continue a vision of collective strength. So the first photos I'll show you are actually some photos of Bickley's beginnings. These are some photos of some labor camps that are right behind Woodburn, behind the Woodburn outlets, one of Woodburn's most visited locations, and you would never realize that right behind it there's these working conditions that farm workers are living in today. And this is really why Bickley started, actually. And for me, looking at these photos, it takes me back to a different time. I am a daughter of farm workers. I am a daughter of immigrants that came here with no papers in 1986, really following the migration of farm work, starting in Santa Ana, California, in the strawberry fields, and ending up in Salem, Oregon, where I grew up, to be in the Christmas tree industry. And this is actually where my own family came in contact with Bickley, because they were one of the families that was able to benefit from the 1986 amnesty that basically was a huge part of what the services Bickley offered, and it was a huge part of how we gained our membership throughout the last 33 years. My community itself is a place in Northeast Salem. It was very heavily an immigrant community, not just Mexicanos, but I grew up with a lot of Laotians and Marshallese kids and Russian kids, Vietnamese kids, and it was a very vibrant childhood. It was full of lots of diverse backgrounds and stories, and that was the beautiful part of it. The other part of it was also that, you named the statistic, we also had it. We're in a very low-income community still in Northeast Salem, where I grew up. No health insurance ever growing up. My dad got a third-grade education. My mom never went to high school. And this was a similar pattern I started noticing in my own community, a lot of people coming up for similar reasons. And also just adding the additional pressures of what it is to be a first-generation immigrant family. We had lots of language barriers. Immigration status was a barrier as well. And also just constantly being the target of discrimination and exploitative situations in your job also added to that. I live these stories, and I still live these stories, and I still hear these stories from people who come to Picun, who come through our sister organizations, to tell me what's happening in their communities. Most of the time, these stories involve wage theft. They involve sexual violence and sexual abuse at work, in their families, in the community at large. It involves very high fatality rates in certain industries, specifically the farm and agriculture is an industry that is one of the top 10 most dangerous jobs that you can do in our state, in our country. And these are all things that really affect the way that we do things. So our story of Alianza Poder, the network of sister organizations that I'm going to talk to you about today, was really built to remove barriers for immigrant workers, for farm workers, for Latinx working families. And it was really to address some of the reasons why we were being marginalized at the intersection of race, at the intersection of class and gender. And today, I'll show you how our Alliance of Sister Organizations came up with a creative solution to address some of these problems. In some of the most unexpected places, we're finding people that are finding solutions to these problems. And most of the time, and I would say that this is one of the biggest things I advocate for personally, is that we actually can find the best solutions for people, especially if those same people that are closest to the pain are getting the opportunity to solve their own problems. So there's great power. One of the biggest things I want to talk about today is that there's great power in coalition and alliance building. And especially when we're trying to solve some of the deepest societal issues of our time. So who are the sister organizations? And actually, before I go into that, I also want to say that we're a community that really does do its work at the margins of the mainstream. And actually, before I go into the sisters, I'm going to talk about Pekun. Pekun itself was started by 80 farm workers in 1985 that were taking action against the exploitative situations that they were being put in at the workplace. This being one of those big things, but also wages, also different discrimination issues on the job. And they were really inspired by the activism of Dolores Huerta and Cesar Chavez, who actually came up here around that time and helped us start our union. And this, despite the fact that farm workers were actually specifically excluded from the National Labor Relations Act. The National Labor Relations Act is a law that allows different sectors to unionize. So this meant that we had to get really creative with the way that we did our stuff, the way that we empowered our workers, the way that we empowered our community. And it meant that we had to build a system that fit our needs. It meant that we had to push the system, the mainstream system, to be better. And at the end of the day, we decided that we were just going to create our own thing, while still trying to make the mainstream system better to solve problems. And the problems that we were really trying to solve, you heard the statistics already, in addition to low life expectancies and high death rates. And also the problem of there being a big lack of Latino serving organizations that were for immigrant communities, for farm workers issues, also the lack of information in Spanish, and also in addition, indigenous languages, because unknown to some folks, there's also 2 top spoken indigenous languages here in Oregon, Purépecha and Mixteco. And it means that it makes our work a little bit harder if we don't have those languages that are spoken in our communities and culturally responsive services. Also, just the understanding of migration and having a love and an empathy for the immigrant is vital. When someone goes into a building and they're getting discriminated, it's very hard for them to want to come back. And also our desire to want to build organizations that actually built up our leaders to be leaders so that we can have organizations that are reflective of the community. So Pekun founded several programs. And eventually, those programs just had to get spun out of Pekun. They didn't fit our union model. And that was basically what gave birth and what started the Alianza Poder. It gave birth to the farm worker movement, which we like to call ourselves a movement. Our alliance is 10 sister organizations, and the vision of the alliance is to really have an empowered Latino community that is based in our cultural assets, and that also we bring the collective up. It's an effort to try to make Oregon a better place for everybody. So those organizations are the following. PECUN. PECUN is the labor arm, but we also have a political organization. So we do labor and politics. And then we have Centro de Servicios de Campesinos. So someday if you come to PECUN and we give you a little tour, I can walk you through these organizations. This is the place where we do direct services. And actually this is where we got super duper creative with the PECUN membership model. Today, PECUN's union has 7,000 farm workers as members, but they really had to come in through the center to get a service, immigration services. Honestly, sometimes something as simple as reading your utility bill for you because some of our members aren't able to actually read or write. And we ask you, hey, do you want to become a member of the union? We're giving you this service today, but you becoming a member of our union means you can empower yourself, you can be a part of big systems change. There's CAUSA, Oregon's Immigrant Rights Organization, which really came out of an effort in the early 90s that started a coalition to defend immigrants' rights. There were a lot of nasty measures that were coming out attacking immigrant communities, and today it's not only become the defense arm, but it's also become the offense arm. There's Mano a Mano Family Services, which is a direct service center in Salem, and it has a food pantry, it has citizenship classes, it has a community center, so it's a hub for all kinds of navigation of services. There's Farm Worker Housing Development Corporation, and this is actually probably one of our biggest organizations in the sister network. It's affordable housing for farm workers and low-income families. Latinos Unidos Siempre, which is the youth-led organization that came out of the effort to fight the school-to-prison pipeline and racial profiling of our youth in the 90s. Salem Kaiser Coalition for Equality, which is an organization that came out of parents realizing that they needed to learn how to advocate for their kids that were also seeing discrimination in their school, similar to what they were seeing in their own jobs. Mujeres Luchadoras Progresistas, which is a group that actually left PECUN at one point because we were being really sexist back in the late 80s. And they decided to create a group of women that were going to empower themselves economically, and they do a big entrepreneurial project at the end of the year. Capaz's Leadership Institute, which is one of the most essential hubs for our leadership pipeline. There's a youth leadership program there. There's a leadership program that trains folks to step into electoral positions and boards and commissions. And it's also the place that organizes all of us. They keep us all in sync, and they keep us all as organized as possible, even though it's kind of hard to organize us sometimes too. And Radio Poder, which is 98.3, it's La Voz del Pueblo. It's a radio station that is high-powered, reaches the entire Mid-Willamette Valley, and it focuses on educating, social justice, and organizing, led by volunteers, really, and some staff as well, with radio programs that are in Spanish, Purépecha, and Mixteco. So that's the Alianza Poder model. And that's really the ecosystem that we work in. We reach different folks in different places in their lives. And our focus really is to be holistically integrated, driven by positive social change and justice, with this idea that we can have a really strong theory of change if we do direct services, if we organize, if we advocate, and if we do this all together at the center, being at this idea of social justice and social change together. So how did we do this? Well, I'll tell you, this took a lot of time. In the description, it tells you that I'm leading this, but I was not the only one who was a part of making this happen. It took a lot of people, countless hours, 40 years to build this thing, right? So patience is a virtue in this work. And the structure is not hierarchical. It's actually very organic. We don't have a president of this. Everybody's their own executive director in the organization. They all have their boards. And it really has been a place where we had to create common values together. The Si Se Puede values of our movement, equity, dignity, respect are the values that have brought us together. We had to also have a common goal, which is the thing that I talked to you earlier, our vision of having an empowered Latino community by our cultural assets to improve the quality of life for everyone in Oregon. Our theory of change, which is really this: direct service, civic engagement, organizing, and leadership development coming together to do what the vision is trying to do. And also, we have to have agreements of working together. Some of them are more explicit. We have like a code of conduct, there's a charter, things like that, but there's also parts of our culture of working together that are also more unspoken traditions of how we come together as a movement. So I'll leave you with one last thing, with our impact. The impact that we've been able to do has been felt across the state and it's felt across the country. Today, Alianza Poder has 1,300 affordable housing units that house not just farm workers, but low-income families. We also were able to pass the big driver's license bill this last year. It's been a struggle that thank you. It's been a struggle that we've had for the last 10 years, and it has been the #1 issue in our community, the fact that there are people in our community that can't have a piece of identity, the ability to drive, and mainly because of immigration status. We've registered and talked to thousands of Latino voters, many of them voting for the very first time, and it has led today to the election of the first immigrant, indigenous, migrant Latina who is representing House District 22. This is the first majority-minority House district in the state. And so together, our collective budgets are $8 million. So we have the economic power, we have the people power, and it really is a matter of how you bring it together, how do you align systems to be able to really make your strength be felt and amplified. And this last slide is really just to say that, like I said, this took a long time. It took creativity, it took a lot of resilience, and I just want to remind you that a lot of the work that's happening is not happening in the mainstream. A lot of this work is invisible work, but it's important also to remember as entrepreneurs, I know you all want to do it all on your own, but I'll leave you with my favorite African proverb: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Thank you so much. There's a Begin website.